Good morning. Joining us now, Joe DiGenova, legal analyst, former U.S. Attorney to the District of Columbia, and a regular here on Mornings on the Mall. Joe, good morning. Happy Monday.
Good morning.
So, boy, the media did not have a good weekend with this Buzzfeed piece that came out alleging that the president directed Michael Cohen to falsely testify. What is your take on this? Because here's a question I have for you. Who planted this story, and why did Mueller wait, 6 hours at least, to debunk this?
Well, the story, according to Buzzfeed, was planted by two federal law enforcement officials who knew the information was false. That's a crime, what they did, and it's going to be investigated by the Department of Justice because the new Attorney General, Bill Barr, when he's confirmed, will be the new sheriff in town. And I can assure you that the reason Robert Mueller broke his rule of saying nothing was because the new sheriff, Bill Barr, would not have liked it had he not done so. Everyone wants to be very fastidious about Bill Barr following all the rules, and he should recuse himself and this and that. Bill Barr has made it very clear he's going to follow the rules, but he is the final arbiter of various things, including who violates secrecy rules surrounding investigations. Bob Mueller knew that as soon as Bill Barr was sworn in, he was going to go into the Justice Department, Mueller, and was going to brief Barr on the status of the investigation. And Barr was going to ask him, Bob, why didn't you deny categorically that story in BuzzFeed was false? Why didn't you say it was false? And Mueller would have said, it's not my responsibility.
Right.
And Bill Barr at that point would have said, Bob, you're fired. Mueller knows that. He knows that Bill Barr is a serious lawyer. He's not like Jeff Sessions, who was afraid of his own shadow. Bill Barr is a very, very serious lawyer. And Mueller did. I'm quite sure that Rudy Giuliani and Jay Sekulow complained bitterly to Mueller, and Mueller had no choice.
Do you feel like there's any chance that this was a leak investigation that popped out in public? That they were being fed information in order to see who's leaking it?
Yes. I believe it was a trap. I think that frequently, sometimes false information will be given to certain federal officials to see who are suspected of leaking, to see if they leak the false information.
Yes.
In other words, these were probably two people not involved in the Mueller probe, but who get information from federal investigators from time to time, and they were probably fed false information. We'll find out about that soon enough. Believe me, Bill Barr will find out what happened here.
You know, BuzzFeed, the organization that published this isn't their first rodeo with being accused of poor journalistic practices. The biggest one emanating by them publishing all of the unverified details of the Trump dossier, that Steele dossier. But now defending, of course, their report, saying that they stand by their reporting. They continue to do that this weekend. It might behoove them. I don't know what do you think about this, Joe, of burning their sources, considering all of their credibility rests on what their supposed law enforcement sources told them.
Well, I'm not going to try and tell journalists how to live their lives. American journalism now is at a low point. We're at yellow journalism squared. This is the worst state American journalism has been in over 100 years, and all because they didn't like the result of the 2016 election, and they have an animus toward the President of the United States. They'll never reveal their sources. And it may be that when they do, they're going to be embarrassed by it, and they wouldn't want to show how uninformed these people might be. If you're an honest reporter, you lose your obligation to maintain confidentiality when the person who gave you the information lied to you. So of course they should tell, but they won't.
Last week, we got a report about Bruce Orr and his testimony. And in that testimony, we found out that he claims that he warned senior DOJ officials that the dossier was connected to Clinton, that it might be biased. And I thought that was really important. Vince and I discussed that. Like, wow, this is big news. Didn't even make a splash at all. Do we interpret that wrong?
No, you were absolutely right. That was huge news, and the reason it's really big news is because of what it shows. You recall that last February, Nunes was in a battle with the House Democrats on the Intelligence Committee about releasing redacted information about the FISA applications. Nunes won, he put it out, and Adam Schiff, the ranking member at the time, said that the dossier played very little role in the securing of the FISA warrants, and didn't mention something very important. He didn't mention that Bruce Orr had told him, Schiff and Nunes and the other members of the committee, that he, Bruce Orr, had warned senior FBI and Justice Department officials that the dossier was created by a person who was vitally opposed to the president, who hated the president, that the information was unverified, that it was biased, that it was unsubstantiated, and they needed to be extremely careful about potentially using it with the FISA court. Adam Schiff lied to the American people. He said all of that wasn't true. Have you seen one thing reported about that by any of the people in the American media? And the answer is no. And then people are complaining about BuzzFeed. Every single reporter who covered the Adam Schiff versus Nunes issue in last February should be ashamed of themselves. But again, the American media has no shame. We don't have a press anymore. We have advocacy groups.
Yeah, and unfortunately, so many people have written off the press as a sideshow because it is on often cases. But the effect of the press is, especially as you went into Friday with everybody calling for impeachment, it whips Democrats into a frenzy and gives them air cover now that they're in control of the House to start issuing subpoenas and launching investigations. It matters what the press is talking about, whether or not you like it.
Well, I don't think there's any doubt about the fact that notwithstanding their current state, the press is influential, regrettably, at this point, because they have no honor, they have no dignity, they don't respect their function and their role under the First Amendment. They are embarrassing themselves under the First Amendment, but they nonetheless are there, and they can cause a lot of damage. They're also doing something, I think, that's very, very dangerous for themselves. They have dined out for years on libel laws that make them immune from lawsuits by public officials because of the actual malice standard. You have to prove that news organizations acted with actual malice. I think they're educating courts, and they're educating the Supreme Court, that those protections under New York Times versus Sullivan may be up for a review, that their conduct is so reprehensible and so corrosive of true First Amendment freedoms that New York Times versus Sullivan may not be good law anymore. I would be very careful if I were the press.
Well, you wouldn't have to look far for evidence of actual malice. Just go to Twitter.
I think it's the press's worst enemy. They really are creating some fabulous evidence for people suing for libel.
Big time. To Joe DiGenova, thanks as always. Really appreciate your insight.